Greetings and welcome to the Black Flame Podcast, where history and legends collide, where cryptids, the supernatural, and the paranormal run free.
We are your hosts, Dan and John Leonard, and we are here to bring you stories of haunted places, creepy cryptids, and harrowing legends. So sit back and let us guide you through the world of the unexplained.
Tonight we'll be covering the Myrtles Plantation and the Sorrel-Weed house.
So stick around to learn more about these two haunted locations. When people think of a bed and breakfast, they think of a comfortable, quiet, peaceful place where guests can go to unwind from the stresses of everyday life. But there's a dark history surrounding one bed and breakfast in particular. Located in St. Francisville, a small town northwest of Baton Rouge, lies one of the most haunted locations in America. This is the Myrtles Plantation. The start of the Myrtles began in 1794, when General David Bradford, a successful business attorney, was forced to flee from Pennsylvania to avoid being arrested for being a member of the famous Whiskey Rebellion. Bradford had to leave his family behind in Pennsylvania while he was on the run. Bradford would end up buying 650 acres of land northwest of Baton Rouge in St. Francisville, Louisiana. It's here that he would build an 8-bedroom house big enough to accommodate him, his wife, and their 5 children, and he would name the property Laurel Grove. After receiving a pardon in 1799 from President John Adams, Bradford was able to move his family from Pennsylvania to the sprawling estate he made in Louisiana. Bradford would sometimes bring in law students to teach them more about their craft. One of these students was Clark Woodruff, who would later become Bradford's son-in-law after marrying his daughter Sarah. After Bradford's death in 1808, Woodruff helped manage Laurel Grove with his mother-in-law, Elizabeth. Woodruff and Sarah would go on to have 3 children together. But on July 21st, 1823, Sarah died after getting yellow fever. During this time, yellow fever would run rampant through families in the South. There weren't many families in the area that went on without being affected by the illness. These were dark times for a lot of families, and it would only get worse for the Woodruffs. On July 15, 1824, his only son James would die of yellow fever, and 2 months later tragedy would strike again. Cornelia Gale, one of his daughters, would also succumb to the disease. But this is only one theory of how they died. You see, there was a slave that worked as a housekeeper named Chloe. It was said that Chloe was having sexual relations with Clark Woodruff, and she was afraid that if she stopped, then she would be forced to work in the fields. One day, Chloe was eavesdropping on Clark and Sarah. When she was caught, her punishment was to have one of her ears cut off. After her grueling punishment, she was said to wear a green turban to hide her scar. Chloe then baked a cake for one of the children's birthday parties. Filled with anger, she added crushed islander leaves to the ingredients, which are poisonous and in large enough doses can kill a person. Sarah and her children ate the cake, and the poison would eventually overtake their bodies, and they would perish from the lethal ingredient. Clark Woodruff would continue to look after Laurel Grove until the passing of his mother-in-law in 1830. In 1834, Woodruff sold the estate to Ruffin Gray Sterling, a wealthy family who owned several plantations around the Mississippi. On January 1st, Ruffin and his wife, Mary Catherine Cobb, would move into Laurel Grove and take over the sprawling estate, which includes houses, land, buildings, and all the slaves that worked on the property. The Sterlings would later add to the already 8-bedroom home, and they would also rename the estate. They would name it the Myrtles. 4 years after construction is complete, Ruffin Sterling died from tuberculosis on July 17, 1854, leaving everything to his wife and 9 children. Tragedy seems to be a running theme for those who live at the Myrtles. Sterling's oldest son, Lewis, would die later that year. But this wouldn't be the end of tragedy for this family. According to the Point Coupe Democrat newspaper, on January 1871, Sterling's son-in-law, William Winter, was teaching a Sunday school session in the house. He heard the sound of horse galloping outside, getting closer to the house. Along with this came an unfamiliar voice, calling for him. Winter walked out to see who it was and was shot on the spot. He would collapse and die on the porch of the Myrtles. A man by the name E.S. Weber was convicted of murdering Winter, but there are no records of this case or trial that were ever recorded, leaving the case unsolved. Sarah was unsurprisingly devastated by this and would continue to live at the Myrtles until her death in April 1878 at the age of 44. In 1970, the plantation was purchased by the mayor's family. They would turn the plantation into a bed and breakfast. It was after this that reports of spiritual activity began to pour out from within the house. In 1992, one of the staff members of the Myrtles took pictures for insurance reasons. The staff members' pictures would be rejected by the insurance company because they said they didn't want any pictures with people in them. Looking back over the pictures, the staff member can clearly see an apparition of a woman with a turban on her head standing between two buildings. This was thought to be the ghost of Chloe. A patent researcher by the name of Norman Benoit looked over the photos. After doing a number of tests, he found that the physical measurements of the figure match human proportions. Another famous attraction of the Myrtles is the haunted mirror. While the mirror isn't the original to the house, tour guides say that they have seen faces and even children's fingerprints on the mirror. It's thought that the people are seeing Sarah and her children in the mirror, perhaps because this was the room that they were fed the poisonous cake. Owners and guests of the Myrtles have heard footsteps on the stairs when no one's there, lights turning on and off by themselves, children crying, doors moving on their own. Some even say that they have been woken up by a lady wearing a green turban. Some also claim to see girls in old-style clothing looking out the windows of the house. In 2016, John Moss, who was the owner of the Myrtles at the time, said, and I quote, "People get absolutely freaked out," end quote. Moss bought the estate in 1992, and when he did, an older local woman told him, "They'll let you know in the first 90 days if you can stay." Hearing this, Moss was skeptical and laughed it off, but it didn't take long for him to change his mind. Moss would have a few incidents in the house, but in one, he says that the spirits were calling his wife's name, and he believed that his toddler at the time had spirits visiting him. Moss's wife, Tita, has her fair share of ghostly encounters. There are two that really stick out for me. The first one took place in 1993. Their toddler, Morgan, was asleep in an antique bed with iron railings. While in another room working, Tita heard a raspy voice say, "Check your baby." She thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But then she heard the voice again, "Check on your baby." She ran to Morgan's room, but he wasn't there. She ran outside and found him moving toward the edge of a pond. Tita then scooped him up and held him. In the second account Tita had that caught my attention was one day she saw a little girl walking with her mother and father. The man asked for tickets for him and his wife to tour the house. So Tita asked, "What about your daughter?" The man's smile turned into a frown and said, "They may never have children." Both John and Tita Moss agree and say that the spirits here are guardian angels, and any time they encounter them, it's for a greater purpose. Today, the Myrtles is still one of the most haunted locations in America. Feel free to take a tour, or even spend the night or two at the Myrtles. But if you do, remember one thing. The staff and the guests you see around you aren't the only ones roaming the Myrtles.
Well, damn.
It's a lot there.
Yeah, the one that gets me, and I've heard of that account before, of the
Chloe?
Yeah, the surveyor, whoever, the insurance adjuster, whatever the guy was doing when he was taking the photos, and she happened to show up and wonder who they think it's her anyway.
So here's the picture. I pulled it up for you. You see it?
Yeah, that's so crazy. I've also seen blown up versions of it too.
Yeah, there's a few versions of it, like that one. You can see a lot better there.
Yeah.
But it's, if you look at just if anyone who wants to look at it, just type in Chloe Myrtles Plantation, and you can definitely see the photo. And it's kind of eerie how you can see a figure, but then you can see through it.
Yeah, it's partially translucent, but
Yeah.
it definitely looks like a woman standing there with like a turban on her head. Like everything checks out. It looks.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
The craziest thing about that to me was the person taking the pictures didn't even notice them at first.
Right.
He tried to turn them into the insurance company, and they said, "We can't do this with a person in there."
Yeah. Well, that's
And then he looked over it.
Yeah, the craziest part is that like the insurance company he turned it into caught it.
Yeah.
So like that's somebody who is completely not concerned with whether or not this place is haunted.
Yeah.
They just see a picture and it looks like there's someone standing there and they're like, "Oh, we can't accept this.
Can't
There's
use this."
clearly a person there."
Yeah.
But like there wasn't.
There wasn't.
So,
Yeah.
that I think adds another layer onto it where it's not someone going out looking for,
Right.
it's not what do they call it, pareidolia, where like you see things that aren't there, you're making connections that aren't.
Yeah, it's kind of like the placebo effect in a way, I guess.
Yeah. Whereas like these people had no clue, they were coming into it blind
Yeah.
and saw a figure and were like, "Oh, we can't accept this picture of someone standing there." That's just
Yeah.
so cool.
The other one that got me was the encounter of Tita had with her son Morgan.
Right.
Apparently, he was crawling towards the pond and was about to go in the pond, but that raspy voice was saying to check on your baby, check on your baby. And after going over a couple more reports that Tita had, she calls all the spirits their guardian angels.
Yeah.
So they're the mosses are happy to have them.
Right. They don't view them as malicious or anything.
No, I don't think there has. I read one report about one of the mirrors flying across the room towards someone.
Whoa.
But I don't know who it was. But that was the only bad thing I've ever read. But from the mosses, they, like I say, they're guardian angels to them. Obviously, they saved that little kid's life.
If that encounter's true,
Yeah.
I call that a good ghost.
How about it?
Not a bad one.
Good grief. Yeah.
The only thing is like, just to throw a little weird twist on it, what if there's another bad ghost there that was luring the baby towards the pond in the first place? How did it get out of the crib? Why was it going towards the pond?
They got mermaids in the pond.
Oh my God, no way. But not that needs any, further conjecture, but it's still odd. Like I know babies get out of cribs.
Yeah.
But like,
And, well, you got to think, what does a pond look like to a baby? Probably looks pretty cool.
yeah.
Stuff, light shining off of it and water rippling and stuff like that. Probably looks pretty attracting to a kid.
Yeah. No, that's just pure conjecture, but
Yeah.
just a thought.
And the other one that got me with Tita, she said that, she thought there was a couple that had a daughter. And when they came walking up, the man asked for 2 tickets. And he said, "What about your daughter?" So man said, "We may never have kids." And apparently his face came off as very serious.
Right.
It was, it wasn't jokingly or anything. It was very serious. And then when she looked, Tita was going to keep complimenting on how pretty she was and how nice she was acting, because the girl was apparently like skipping behind the parents or the couple.
That's so crazy.
And she wasn't there by the time they got up there.
Well, that's almost like the St. Augustine Lighthouse encounter that you had
Yeah.
gone over in our previous episode, where someone on the tour thought that, was complimenting somebody else on how well their kid was behaving, and they're like, "We don't have a kid." And there
Yeah.
were no kids on the tour. So, like, another one of those instances where, like, again, bringing up that question, what was the kid wearing?
Yeah, were they wearing? They had to be wearing, I assume, Victorian style clothing or something,
Right?
Or something close to those lines.
Yeah, if it's an actual spirit, unless it's
Of course, I guess maybe it was just like a little dress that kids wore. Maybe it didn't look that crazy. I don't know.
yeah, maybe things haven't changed
You know?
that much since then.
Because you look at some dresses that little kids wear back in Victorian age movies, and they don't look that crazy. To look
Yeah.
at a little girl wearing a sundress nowadays,
That's true, I guess. I hadn't thought about that angle when it comes to little girls, anyway.
Yeah. Little boys and men are very different for the most part.
Oh, even the dresses that women would wear, grown
Yeah.
women look way different now
Yeah.
than they do back then. No, I've heard a lot about the Myrtles Plantation and how it's supposed to be one of the most haunted locations in America.
Yeah, and like I say, nothing sounds malicious or anything. The Now that you encounter with the old lady that John Moss had when he bought the property, the old lady, when she said they'll let you know the first 90 days if you can stay, she's talking about the ghosts.
Right.
Because she knows. And
well, and that kind of begs the question then, they'll let you know within the first 90 days. Obviously, somebody must have had a bad encounter. We're like...
That's, I said I read a report about a mirror flying across the room.
Yeah, right. Like, there has to be some kind of bad... Like, there had to have been, I guess, some kind of past experience where people tried to move in or, had something and they just did not feel welcomed by the ghost residents.
Or that could just be people, they could just be friendly ghosts, but the thought of ghosts alone or things happening on their own just freaks people out enough.
Right.
That could just be too.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, or it doesn't have to have bad intent.
Yeah, I mean, if we were sitting here right now and something went flying across the room, I'd be a little freaked out, but, if it didn't hit me or I didn't get scratched or anything like that, I'd be a little freaked out, but I wouldn't be worried.
Yeah. We'll have to go over this house at some point. Maybe it's like a fun bonus episode or something.
I don't know. A lot of stuff happened in this house.
Yeah, weird. And I'm pretty sure this location's been investigated by like TAPS and Ghost Adventures.
Yeah.
And all kinds of your big... This is a big name in the world of Southern haunts, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most haunted places in America. So, of course it's going to be looked at by a lot of investigative teams, but yeah, especially the ones that stick out are TAPS and Ghost Adventures, the famous ones,
I'm pretty sure they had some pretty cool EVP activity there at least. TAPS.
I think they did.
It's been a long time since I've seen that episode.
Yeah. The interesting thing, too, about Clark, sorry, not Clark, Winter, when he got shot.
Right.
No one knows who it was.
No.
They thought they had a guy, but the trials were never recorded. So nothing ever came up, so we don't know who shot him and killed him and why. Apparently the person was calling out to him and saying that he had some business to settle with him. And of course his practice was, legal stuff. So could have done family member wrong or
who knows at that point.
And even reports say that like the tour guides will tell you that he got shot in the porch and crawled halfway up the steps and died. And people still to this day say they see blood stains sometimes wiped on the walls or on the stairs, but he actually never died there.
Huh.
He died on the porch.
Right.
Which is strange.
That is weird. So what if people are legitimately seeing something there, what is that from?
Yeah.
Some unreported event, I guess.
I assume. I mean, there has to be a lot more than that's unreported. I mean, unfortunately, it's a plantation. Not a lot of good stuff happened there,
Right, back in the day. Unfortunately,
right.
although...
I mean, Chloe got her ear cut off.
Yeah, I'm sure she wasn't the only slave to be mistreated there.
No. And she was afraid that, she would work out in the fields. That was the hardest part of working there, was working out in those fields. Of course, it's Louisiana. It's stupid hot, stupid humid down there.
Right.
And it's just not bearable to work out there.
No. Anyone getting paid probably still wouldn't want to do that job.
I know. Yeah.
Let alone if you're just being forced to do it. I can't imagine.
Yeah. But now it's a bed and breakfast. Now people can go and visit and have dinner, go take a bunch of tours. They have tours and everything.
Do they have ghost tours, like specifically set up for, like, telling you all the haunted happenings? And then, like, because I know a lot of places like that will have the historical tour where they're just taking you through and walking you through a whole history background of it. And then sometimes they'll do an actual ghost tour where they, like, really hype up the, They do the ghost tour. That's where they talk about Winter dying on the stairs and not on the porch. They talk about that. They go over and they'll show you the mirror and everything like that people report seeing fingerprints from children and people who they say it's Sarah. They can see her face in the mirror. But they'll take you to the mirror. They'll take you... they have ghost tours. And I assume they have a historical tour too. But... I would think. That'd be a cool place to go see.
Okay, I didn't know which reports to pull out. There have been so many reports. I could have gone on for pages upon pages of reports. Some reports say that people have woken up with who they say was Chloe standing next to their bed, or even little girls. They hear, a lot of doors closing, running, footsteps, voices, a lot of just stuff. Sometimes they see people in through the windows on the outside, and yeah,
I know from experience. Not that I don't think any of them's ever been real ghosts, but waking up with something next to your bedside. I've had those hypnagogic. I never know how to say it. The hallucinations that you get like when you're waking up, where like you can move. It's not like sleep paralysis, but you can see everything around you, but your brain's not actually totally awake yet. And so it's almost like you're still in a half dream state. And for some reason, figures is what a lot of people see. And I've seen a lot of them. It is an unnerving feeling.
It's gotta be
like someone that is not supposed to be there standing next to your bed or across the room or whatever, and within a couple seconds it goes away. And now I know what's up whenever I have them, so like I can kind of calm myself down. But at first it really freaked me out.
Yeah.
And like I can't imagine not having those experiences, being in a weird place that you've never been to before that's supposedly haunted, waking up and seeing what is potentially a real ghost standing right next to you.
Yeah.
That's got to be so friggin' scary.
Or even freakier if you woke up, saw someone like a ghost standing next to you, and you didn't know all the history behind the plantation. You just thought it was a historical thing.
Yeah.
And you just woke up and all of a sudden there's someone there, and then you tell a staff member and they're like, yeah, no, that's it's probably one of the ghosts.
Yeah.
Make people pack their bags quick.
Oh my God.
No, it was a lot of fun. This one was a really interesting one because, like I say, I had to really pick through the reports because there were so many, and there's still more, obviously, to this day. I would be really cool to visit there and stay like a night or two there. That'd be a lot of fun.
Never been to Louisiana. Be a good excuse to go down there.
Oh, Mardi Gras.
That too.
It's good enough.
Yeah.
It's just hot. I don't like the heat.
Yeah. Crocodiles or alligators.
Alligator. Crocodiles.
Maybe they got crocs.
No. Those people down there, you imagine they saw a crocodile. They'd kill that thing in an instant.
I think I'd be more afraid of those than the ghosts, so I might just stay out of the swamp, stick to the plantation.
I would be too. This has been the Myrtles Plantation. Stick around to learn more about the Sorrel-Weed house.
Known by many as the most haunted city in America, Savannah, Georgia has more than its fair share of ghostly legends. It only makes sense when you look back on all the bloodshed and heartbreak connected to the area. From Civil War cemeteries to colonial-era taverns, Savannah checks every box on the list of possible haunted locations. Tonight, however, we'll be focusing on what's often referred to as the most haunted house in the most haunted city in the United States. The Sorrel-Weed house. Born in Haiti in 1793, Francis Sorrel was essentially abandoned by his father after his mother's death. He was then raised by his extended family who did what they could for the boy. As a young man, he met a wealthy pair of brothers who owned a shipping company. They liked Francis so much that they took him under their wing and taught him how to be a successful shipping merchant. Eventually, he landed in Virginia, where he met a young lady named Lucinda Moxley. The two quickly fell in love and were married not long after their first meeting. To set up shop in a better location, Francis moved himself and his new bride down to Savannah. They were married for 5 blissful years and had 3 children before Lucinda would succumb to yellow fever. Shortly after her death, Francis returned to Virginia and his wife's family offered their other daughter, Matilda, for him to marry. He couldn't raise 3 children in a city where he had no family after all. So he accepted their offer, and as a gift to his new bride, he had a house built for her back in Savannah. Construction on the 16,000 square foot Greek Revival-style mansion was completed in 1840. Its beautiful symmetry and towering structure exude an air of confidence and luxury that permeated the fine culture of high society in the 1800s. Appearances, however, can be deceiving. Even though everything looked pristine on the outside, not all the goings-on inside the home were so peaceful. During their time at the home, Frances and Matilda set to the task of growing their family. They would go on to have 8 children, but only 5 would make it to adulthood. The oldest daughter, Matilda Ann, contracted scarlet fever and actually died in the house's walls. From all accounts, this was the first reported death inside the home, but it was far from the last. One of Frances's oldest sons, Frank, was a doctor who did a lot of traveling and therefore never got to spend much time with his family. Frances took issue with this and wanted his son to come back and live with the family. So as a compromise, Frank said he would come back to live with his father, but only on the condition that he would be allowed to practice medicine in a room off of the basement. Frances agreed to the bargain. But Frank, you see, was no ordinary doctor. He was a trauma surgeon. This meant he would have been operating on patients who were often mortally wounded in one way or another. Even though Frank was considered one of the best trauma surgeons in the nation at the time, his mortality rate was still above 50%. This means that many people died in what is now called the surgeon's room. Although the number of deaths in the room are high, there's still one more alleged story that is arguably even more tragic than trauma victim mortalities. Being a wealthy home in 1800s Georgia, it comes as no surprise that slaves were kept on the grounds and used as housemaids, butlers, cooks, and so on. It is said that they worked in the basement below and lived in separate quarters on the grounds. However, the head housemaid, Molly, had her own living quarters, away from the other slaves, above the carriage house. The story goes that a party was getting ready to be underway, and normally Molly would be in charge of the rest of the enslaved to keep them organized and on track to have everything ready for when the party commenced. But this time, Molly seemed to be missing. Matilda was looking everywhere for her, but she was nowhere to be found in the mansion. She searched all through the house, and when she was about to give up, she thought she'd go and check Molly's quarters. She made her way up the carriage house steps and opened the door to her room. When she did, she found Molly in bed, and lying next to her was Frances. Struck with grief and betrayal, it's said that Matilda ran back into the house and locked herself outside on the second-story balcony. She was frantically wailing and sobbing and almost convulsing with shock and sorrow. While astonished onlookers watched, she flew over the railing and landed headfirst on the courtyard below. Matilda died later that evening from her injuries. The entire house was devastated, but they never would have guessed what happened next. A few weeks after Matilda's death, Molly went missing again. They searched high and low throughout the mansion, but to no avail. Much like Matilda did on that fateful day, everyone ascended the steps to Molly's room above the carriage house, and they found her. Only this time, she wasn't in bed. She was hanging by a noose strung up over the rafters. No one knows whether it was guilt-induced suicide or a vengeful murder carried out by Matilda's loved ones, and we likely never will. From what I could find, this was the last recorded tragic event to take place in the home, which was sold shortly after the 2 alleged suicides to a prominent businessman named Henry Weed, hence the latter half of the home's name. Before we jump off into modern-day reported hauntings, however, we need to do some backtracking in order to get a clear overview of the total devastation that occurred on this plot of land. You see, long before the house was even a thought in the architect's head, Savannah was a British stronghold during the Revolutionary War, and the ground that the Sorrel-Weed house stands on today marks the spot where a British officer's barracks were. During the Siege of Savannah, also known as the Revolutionary War's bloodiest hour, the barracks were leveled by cannon fire and multiple fatalities were reported. It is said that the remains of the barracks are still buried beneath the foundation along with the bones of those who perished in the battle. It's believed that the spirit of one of those soldiers can still be seen to this day in the form of a dark shadow figure pacing the basement floor. Staying with the basement, the surgeon's room is allegedly the most active area in the house. People report the ghost of a small child thought to be one of the many patients who never made it off the operating table alive. It's said that she loves to play hide and seek and has a tendency to take loose jewelry like earrings and necklaces off of unsuspecting guests who are on tours. The tour guides say you should also watch your feet because she has been known to grab people's ankles when you walk by. It seems as though she's not alone down in the surgeon's room, though. During a tour one night, a little boy began crying and ran up to the tour guide. When the guide asked what was wrong, the little boy said, "Make that boy stop smiling at me," pointing to an empty chair in the corner of the room. He said there was a little boy sitting there with a giant toothy grin frantically waving at him. Another report from this room involves an antique wheelchair that likes to move on its own. While it's not original to the home, that doesn't seem to stop its ghostly residents from moving it around after hours, as staff members have seen it wiggle in place and roll short distances untouched by living hands. If we continue upstairs to the first floor, we reach the men's parlor room. During its heyday, this room was used by the wealthy male socialites of the time during dinner parties. It's said that when you enter the room, you can still smell cigar smoke and whiskey fumes from time to time. People have also heard disembodied conversation, music, and laughter seemingly echoing off the walls. Directly across the floor from the men's parlor is the women's parlor. This room is notorious for one particular piece of furniture. On one end of the room sits an ornate antique mirror. Multiple people have allegedly caught pictures of people in the reflection of that mirror who look very much alive, but were never a part of the tour group. One particular image, if authentic, is quite chilling. A man was trying to take a picture of his two young daughters in front of the mirror. When he pressed the shutter button, the only two people in the frame were his two daughters. After examining the shot, however, he immediately noticed a third girl standing between them that hadn't been there before or after the shot. The upper floors, although closed off to the general public, have generated quite a bit of activity as well, with people claiming to hear footsteps and talking coming from above when no one is up there. Finally, this brings us to the carriage house. Molly's room seems to be fairly active with disembodied voices, moving shadows, and the sound of footsteps. Ghost hunters caught a rather eerie EVP during a session in Molly's room that sounds like a woman screaming at the top of her lungs. Whether this is an echo from the past or a troubled spirit reaching out to grab our attention in the present, it is utterly bone-chilling either way, much like the ragged history of this otherwise beautiful home. So this place, a lot like the Myrtles Plantation, there are like so many different accounts to pull from that it's kind of hard to boil down into just a few events. But you have the general overview of the activity, like a lot of it seems to repeat, like the wheelchair moving in the basement. And if you go, they have like a lot of different tours that you can go. You can actually book they call it the Ghost Hunters Tour, where you go in after dark, and I think you're like the only people in there. But during even just the regular nighttime tours, when they walk you through and tell you about all the ghostly activity down in the surgeon's room, the tour guides actually give you a disclaimer and say, like, by the way, before we go in this next room, if you have any loose jewelry, earrings, anything like that, take it off and put it in your pocket if you're sentimental about it. Because we've had people lose stuff in there. It just gets pulled right off of them. So, like, all kinds of crazy, and like stuff that happens while tours are going on like that. There's one account I heard of a guy, one of the tour guides was talking while giving a tour, telling people about, I think they were in what they call the drawing room. And when he was in there, like just giving a general history of the house in that room, a chair slammed into a desk. It's a chair that's on wheels. And it just, boom, smacked up against a desk in there, and everybody saw it. Like it's like multiple witnesses to this where there's nobody in that side of the room. It's just crazy. Like the place seems super active.
Well, it's gotta be, it's almost like Gettysburg. Like there's so much, because you talked about the wars that happened there, the Revolutionary War. There's so much that happened on those grounds. There's no surprise. Like I say, it's like Gettysburg. Like when someone says Gettysburg is haunted, there's no wonder, man.
Yeah.
Blood all over the fields, man. Like
And I didn't know it before doing more research about Savannah, but that the city of Savannah has taken part in every war that's been fought on American soil. So it's rife with
negative energy and
all throughout, stemming back all the way to the Revolutionary War. Even before then, probably, when people were trying to settle it, because there were definitely Native Americans in the area at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, it's an old city.
The thing about the mirror, that got me. Because, like, the Myrtles Plantation, the people see stuff in the mirror. I wonder what it is about mirrors that people and ghosts, I wonder why.
I don't know. And there's multiple pictures. I'm going to see if I can pull one up for you real quick. I haven't actually tried this yet, so I don't even know if they're out there.
I wonder why the mirrors. Why that's such a big thing with ghosts and mirror. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's just interesting, though. Because it's the same, like I say, it's the same as the Myrtles Plantation.
Right. So here's an interesting one. This isn't the one with the little girls, but I read about this one. So that guy that's in the red circle there wasn't in that. So there were 3 pictures taken back to back to back, and that guy shows up in the middle picture. It looks like
he looks like a dude that belongs there.
Right. Longer hair, white kind of billowy shirt, and I think this thing that's in front of him is just a person. It's a person's head.
Oh, I was going to say it looks like he's wearing an apron.
Right, that's what I thought at first too, but when you zoom in on this part, I'm pretty sure that's this head of
it is, yeah.
lady standing in front of him. But only showing up in the reflections.
Wonder why.
I don't know. If you go, I was watching a video actually of one of the tours, and they showed a picture of the report about the little girl that showed up between the men's 2 daughters in there. I'm not seeing it here, but if anyone happens to find it, look it up. It's freaky. It's clear as day a third person standing there, and they've had people supposedly analyze the image and say that it hasn't been doctored in any way. It's not photoshopped. They don't think so. Like, it seems legit. Nobody's been able to debunk it yet.
Yeah.
So, like, really creepy. One thing I have to address, though, is that there seems to be some conflicting accounts about the story with Molly and Matilda. So there's not a whole lot of real documentation saying that a slave named Molly ever actually lived there. But that's not to say that an undocumented slave lived there. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Right.
And the other discrepancy that kind of comes up in certain accounts is that Matilda actually killed herself at a house down the street. We know Matilda committed suicide. And from...
Matilda committed suicide.
Matilda was the one that jumped off the balcony.
Yeah.
Or she more than likely jumped. They don't think it was an accident. It looked like it was on purpose. Now with Molly, they don't know if that ever happened. If Molly ever lived there and had an affair with Francis and ended up hanging by a noose, they don't know whether she killed herself or if somebody was out for revenge in the family, one of Francis's sons or somebody else in the household. We don't really know. Obviously, that relationship would not have been looked upon in any good light.
Right.
But Francis was actually, his mother was, you wouldn't call her African American, but was a native of Haiti. So he was half black, essentially, from the sounds of it. But still, any relationship between a wealthy homeowner and their slave was never...
Especially when your wife catches you.
Right. Yeah, being caught in any affair wouldn't be good, but...
Not a good thing.
No. Kind of a fun fact, too. It was neat reading about it. So you know the opening scene in Forrest Gump with the feather that's flying around, and they kind of scan over the skyline of. Turns out that's Savannah. And the opening shot following that feather kind of flying around and lands eventually at Forrest's feet, sitting on the park bench, was filmed from the rooftop of the Sorrel-Weed house.
That's neat.
Yeah, I just kind of thought it was pretty cool.
Wonder if they experienced anything.
I don't know. I thought about that. Like, it's a good thing nobody got pushed off the roof, I guess. But, yeah, there's a lot of weird things, like the They think that the little girl that haunts the surgeon's room, they say it either could be a lost patient, or some people claim that it's Matilda Ann, the oldest daughter of Matilda and Francis, who died of yellow fever. Or scarlet fever, sorry.
Yeah.
But they say she actually died on one of the upper levels of the house, and they say could be her roaming the house, because there's they see little girls apparitions every now and then, or like playful like entities that just seem to be playing games. Nothing there seems like malicious.
You said
either.
Hide and seek.
Yeah,
taking jewelry and
nothing real bad. It seems like stuff that little kids would do, even like rolling around the wheelchair. You know? They're supposedly...
The little boy freaks me out.
Yeah, that's the
that put a bad image in my head.
Mike, that freaked me out when like the dude was like talking about it. It was a tour guide who was actually speaking about it, and it was the kid ran up to him and was like, "Make him stop smiling."
That was freaky.
That gives me chills.
Yeah,
like, and pointing to an empty chair in the corner of a basement, and they keep the basement dark
of
when
course
you're taking the tour there.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to tour this house. It would be so cool. But yeah, with the party atmosphere is basically like what this place was like back in the day.
Seems like it.
Apparently this was like the place to party, and there would be so many people there, hundreds of people, that they would basically have the party in the courtyard out front on the streets, and then like the elite got pulled into the house, and that's where, you know, you'd have your gatherings in the parlor rooms where there was like a piano and a drawing table and plenty of chairs and stuff to sit around and sip whiskey. But Robert E. Lee is one of the higher up socialites who was there, so take of that what you will. But you know, that if it gives you any idea of the kind of prominent figures that were said to have been guests at the home,
right
there you go. But it's crazy, and Ghost Hunters actually investigated this as their first ever Halloween special. Back in like 2005 or 2006, something like that, like a while ago. So it's pretty cool, and they got a lot of good evidence there, I think, with even some weird footage as well. But the place just seems crazy with activity, like all over the place in there.
No wonder. All the deaths that must have happened in the surgeon room, I can't imagine. Just that alone.
That floored me too. Like,
yeah, you having patients come down in your house.
Yeah.
Of course, I guess it's more like a mansion, I guess, but sounds like it anyway.
It's
still place. Like, yeah, let's just come down to my basement where I can work on you, and then they end up dying.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though. It wasn't. I don't think that was that uncommon back then.
No, I mean, mortality rate 50% back in what, the 1800s?
Right, and that's for trauma victims as well. So people who were shot or like hit by carriages or anything like that. So like it was serious stuff.
You'd still think that a guy with a lot of money would be like, let me buy you a building, and then you can run this building, put these people in here versus my basement.
Yeah, like a giant shipping magnate. He definitely had enough money to...
Yeah. Of course, I guess that was the thing back then, too, when you had a lot of money. Like, you had everything in your home, essentially, you know? And the doctors came to your house, too.
Right.
Back in the old days, too. But it was... when you had money, you don't have to leave, I guess, was kind of the thing back then, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you got to kind of stay in your own little world there.
Yeah.
But he, that just, the numbers got me, because when I first heard, like, oh, he was one of the best trauma surgeons back in the day, with a mortality rate that was still over 50%. More than 50% of his patients died, and he was one of the best in the nation. Some people called him the best.
It's hard times.
Crazy.
I mean, you talk about, like, the cold could kill people back then.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, it's true. But
like, you get the sniffles, and people start looking at you funny.
Yeah.
He's going to be gone.
Like nowadays.
He's going to be gone in a week or two.
Yeah.
Well, not so much anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, you got the sniffles. Someone started coughing back then. Yeah, they were probably, like, starting to put together your coffin.
Yeah.
No joke.
And that's what, even back then, like, if you're touring the surgeon's room, they have a bunch of, like, old surgeon tools from back then sitting around that I don't think they're original to the house, but, like,
that'd be cool.
You saw some of that stuff. It's like, for some reason, always freaks me out. Like, Victorian era surgery tools they freak me out. I don't know why.
I mean, surgery tools still kind of freak me out when you look at them.
Yeah, but they're not like. I guess it's because like I think they're dirty or something. Like they all look kind of like old and tarnished, and like they're sitting in a creepy room. Like, just gives me bad vibes.
I mean, any kind of surgery gives me bad vibes, but not many that are nice. You know, especially the process goes behind them. Especially back then, it was. I mean, they're rough on you now when you go into surgery.
Right.
I've seen horror. I've seen videos of people getting knees replaced and stuff, and it's bad.
It's bad.
I can't imagine back then.
Yeah, but that's the thing. If that's where we are now.
Then they couldn't knock you out. They couldn't give you anesthesia.
They just hit you with a pan or something.
They just give you something to bite on.
Bong. Well, they had ether. They would knock you out with ether. Almost like chloroform.
Safe?
No, it can't be. But at least had
you use that to start engines. For people that don't know, you use that to help start engines. If your engine has trouble firing up, spray some ether in it to help it start over. And yeah, just saying for people who don't know what ether is.
And watch out for any backfires.
Really? They would use ether?
Yeah, that's what doctors would use back in the day. It's like chloroform. They put some on a rag, stick it over your mouth, and
is chloroform bad for you?
It's night, huh?
Is chloroform, does that mess up like your brain cells or something?
Well, I mean, just depriving your brain of oxygen, so I would think so.
But it's like getting choked out.
No, because it's a chemical that's being induced in there
that's
binding to. So I don't know how it works. I'm not a doctor, but it can't be good for you.
No, it's got to be better than ether.
Well, what's the difference at that point?
Because you don't use chloroform to start your engine, bud. It's got to be better.
Maybe that's just ether rebranded. It's just got a fancier name.
Ugh.
But
man, medicine was rough. But it's no wonder that place is crawling with spirits. All the stuff that's happened there.
I think it makes sense, and it's a lot of it.
I mean, it's just, I almost ask, how would it not be haunted? You know,
it's kind of, and I mean, none of it. What's interesting is like when we went over Eastern State, some of that stuff seemed like it could have been residual hauntings.
Yeah. And
pretty much all of the accounts here seem to be intelligent. You could argue that maybe the figure in the basement, the shadow man,
figure,
yeah, could be residual, but like they say you kind of get like a bad feeling when you see that thing, which like no doubt I think I probably would too.
Yeah.
Some people have said it's like 8 feet tall. Like it's like,
well, I mean, you also, that's another thing too. When people are scared, they see things in their mind when they're scared, but it's not, a lot of times it's really not what they see.
Right.
Like I was watching an experiment. It was about the Mothman of West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
People say that they were driving by on their car on this highway, and they saw something with red eyes that was standing 8 feet tall. So what they did was they recreated it. So they got a bunch of scientists, put this little set of, like, it looked like eyes, little set of eyes. They put it 5 feet in the air instead of 8 feet. And they drove by going like whatever speed, that 50, 30, whatever speed they were going. And they said, how tall did that look? 90% of them said it was like 7, 8 feet tall. A couple of them said like 4 or 5 feet.
No
something like
way.
That. Yeah. But a lot of them, when you first see something and it scares you, you're not really seeing it for what it is for the most part, because you had that fight or flight response. That's adrenaline running through you.
Right.
So.
And you're dealing with, people, I'm not the best judge of height either.
No. Yeah. And it's dark. And it's a shadow.
And it's a shadow.
So, you're in a freaky room. It's haunted most likely. So you're probably a little heightened up anyway, and you see something, and maybe you do see a shadow. Maybe it is 8 feet tall, but maybe it just looks that way because you were just on edge that whole time,
Right. No, that would make sense too. But either way.
No, either way.
It's freaky.
Yeah.
And seems like an awesome place to go visit. So if you're in the area, go check it out. I really want to go there. I don't think they do like sleepover tours or anything like that anymore.
I don't know if I want to.
But, oh, dude, I would love it. Like, lock me in that house for a night. I want to check that out.
You say that now.
I do. I would love the opportunity.
I'm going to put cameras up and watch you.
Just be sitting outside holding the door shut. Let me out.
Nope.
You said you wanted it.
Stuff flying all around the house behind you.
The Sorrel-Weed house seems to get its haunted reputation honestly, if you believe the reports. It is standing proof that just because something has a beautiful face, that doesn't mean it isn't hiding wells of despair behind it. This is the Sorrel-Weed house. This concludes tonight's episode of the Black Flame Podcast. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Black Flame Podcast.
Be sure to come back next week for a new episode. And remember, stay spooky.